want to tell you about a brand new agent, first listing appointment he'd ever been on in his entire career. He had been licensed for just a matter of weeks. No track record, no impressive credentials, no polished marketing presentation filled with all kinds of statistics and award logos. He walked out of that appointment with a signed listing agreement. The sellers had met with other agents before meeting with him, agents who had years of experience and agents that actually had real production numbers and real marketing budgets, and they chose this brand new agent. Well, at the end of the appointment, they asked him, "How long have you been doing this?" And he told them, "This was my first ever listing." Well, they didn't believe him. They genuinely couldn't believe that someone who had never done a listing presentation before had just walked them through the most clear, confident, and comfortable conversation they had ever had with a real estate agent. In this video, I'm going to show you the framework that he used, every bit of it, because I think once you see how this works, you're going to understand immediately why you have lost listings and ones that you probably should have won the listing. And I'm going to show you exactly what to do differently, starting with your very next listing appointment. Now, here's what I want you to keep in mind as we go through this though. This framework has 3 parts that build on each other in a specific sequence. And the third part, that's the one that actually matters, that's actually going to separate you from every other agent that meets with these people. But it only works if the first 2 are already in place. See, most agents skip straight to this third part. They lead with it. They think that's the whole presentation. In my real estate career, as I've coached and trained over the last 30 years, what I have found is agents struggle with knowing, what do I say? How do I do a listing presentation? And in fact, I have watched new agents ask experienced agents, "Can I go with you?" And they never seem to invite them to go with them. Well, the reason that they keep losing listings is because no one's ever actually taught them how to do a good listing presentation. So I'm going to walk you through all 3 parts of this, and I'm going to show you why the order matters as much as the content. So stick with me as we go through this. All right, let me start by naming something that I think most agents already know on some level, but have never actually had it spelled out for them directly. See, most agents who lose listings they should have won make the exact same mistake every single time, and every agent does it. And it doesn't even matter how experienced you are or how good you are at your job. The mistake is the same. See, what happens is agents walk into the listing appointment and they immediately start presenting. They want to start talking about their credentials, how long they've been licensed, how many homes they've sold, what awards they've won. And then they flip through this marketing presentation and show, here are all the websites that we're going to put your home on. Here's our professional photography. Here's what we do on social media, page after page after page. And here's how great we are. In fact, I always like to joke and say that agents show up and say, "I am the number 1 agent in my cubicle." See, everybody's number 1 at something. And what happens is the seller sits there politely, they nod along, they're listening, but they're not really listening. And then they go list with somebody else. Now, here's the thing that I really want to make sure you understand about why that happens, because it's not what most agents think. See, sellers don't choose the agent with the best credentials. They don't choose the agent with the most impressive marketing plan, and they definitely don't choose the agent with the most pages in their presentation binder. They choose the agent who made them feel understood, most heard, the most confident that this specific person truly gets what we are trying to accomplish with the sale of our home. So think about the last time that you hired someone to do something important, whether it was a contractor, a doctor, an attorney, a CPA, whatever it was. You made the choice of choosing that person over the other options, and the reason wasn't their resume, would be my guess. It wasn't the list of services they offered, or was it the fact that they actually listened to you? They understood your specific situation, and then they made you feel like they knew exactly how to help you. That's what sellers are looking for. And most agents never give it to them because they're too busy talking about themselves. See, if you'll focus on the seller and what's important to them and finding out about that, you're going to get more listings. The lesser agents who get the listing that you feel like you should have got, they're not beating you on experience. They're not beating you on the quality of their marketing plan. They're beating you on the connection that they had with the seller, on making that seller feel heard. They're asking the right questions. And then, and this is the most important part, they're showing how their approach directly addresses what the seller had actually told them. And here's what I want you to hear about that. It's not a personality thing. It's not something you either have it naturally or you don't. You can learn this because it's a repeatable framework. And then once you do learn it, you can use it on every single appointment you go on, regardless of how long you've been in the business or how big your marketing budget is. So let me show you what that looks like, because it breaks down into 3 parts. So here's part 1, is what I call the opening. Every listing appointment should start the same way. You're going to have 3 things. You want to thank them for taking the time to meet with you. You want to acknowledge them and then give some type of a promise. So thank them for meeting with you, something that's just simple, doesn't have, just genuine, doesn't have to be over the top, just a real acknowledgement that you appreciated them taking the time to meet with you. Then I want you to acknowledge something specific about the house or their situation. So whether it's you're reminding them something they told you over the phone that you understood and heard what they said, or something specific about the house that you noticed, the flower bed, how great the curtain peel is, something like that. But not just a general compliment. I want it to be something that you specifically noticed. And then after you've done that, what's going to happen is they're going to recognize that you're actually paying attention to them and their house when you talk to them or when you pulled up. And they're going to be thinking, this person already understands me and my house. And then the third thing you're going to do as part of the opening is give them some type of a promise. Something along the lines of, I'm going to give you some really good information that's going to help you get your home sold. Whether you end up wanting me to be the agent that lists your house or not, I'm going to give you some valuable information. See, the promise does 2 things. It takes the pressure off the seller because they're not committing to anything just by letting you in the door, and it signals confidence. See, you're not here to beg for the listing. You're here to give them value, and then if it makes sense, you'll work together. So here's the piece of the opening that most agents miss. See, for the very first sentence when you walk in the door, you want to assume the sale. Now, don't do it arrogantly, but confidently. The language you use should assume you're going to be their agent. When you acknowledge the flower beds out front of their house, you're going to say something like, those are going to look amazing in the photos when we put your home on the market. So not if we put your home on the market, but when we put your home on the market. See, confidence is contagious, and sellers want to work with an agent who genuinely believes they're going to get the job done. The opening is where that confidence gets established right from the start. Okay, so that's the opening. The second part of your presentation needs to be the questions section. So after the opening, the next thing you're going to do is you're going to ask questions. You're not going to present. You're not going to flip through a marketing book. You're just going to ask questions. And these questions aren't just small talk questions. They're specific, intentional questions designed to get the seller talking about what they're actually trying to accomplish. Their needs, their time frame, their past experience with agents, and most important is going to be their biggest concern. Because here's the thing that most agents never figure out, and it's the most valuable insight I can give you about a listing appointment. The seller is going to tell you exactly what you need to say to win the listing. If you will ask the right questions, see, I like to think of it as like Jeopardy, The answers are all there. You've just got to ask the right question and then actually listen to the answers that they give you. So, what does that sound like? You're asking things like, share with me ultimately what you're trying to accomplish in getting your home sold. Tell me about your timeline and what's important about that time frame. Tell me about your past experience working with real estate agents. What did you appreciate? What did you wish they would have done differently? And what is your biggest concern about getting your home sold? That last question, the what is your biggest concern about getting your home sold, that is the most important one that you're going to ask on your listing appointment, because the answer to that question is the specific thing that you're going to address directly in the next part of your presentation. See, the seller's biggest concern is your single greatest opportunity to show them you are different from every other agent who sat across from them. Now, I want to come back to the story that I told you in the beginning. That brand new agent on his very first listing appointment, he asked that question, and the seller told him something that every other agent had completely overlooked. Something specific to their situation, something that had been bothering them, and none of the other agents had even thought to ask about it. And then he addressed it directly, and that's why he won. Now, I'm not going to tell you the specifics of what it was because it doesn't matter what it was that they talked about. The point isn't the specific answer they gave. The point is he asked, what is your biggest concern? They then shared with them what the biggest concern was, and he created a space for them to tell him what mattered most, and then he listened to what they had to say. See, most agents don't do that. They show up and go, here's why you should list with me. Here's why I'm phenomenal. Here's why I'm the number one agent in my cubicle. And then the seller can tell the difference between that and somebody who asks, what's your biggest concern? Immediately, they can tell the difference between those two agents. Now, here's the third part. And like I said in the beginning, this is the part where most agents try to start with rather than ending with this, okay? So this is where you separate yourself from all the competition. You're going to separate yourself from every other agent out there. And when it's done correctly, and it becomes extraordinarily powerful. But notice, you can only do this effectively if you've already done the first two parts. See, because the way you separate yourself is not by listing credentials and talking about a marketing plan. It's by taking what the seller just told you, letting them know you heard what they said, and in the questions section, and then you showing them in specific direct terms how you're going to address that biggest concern. See, the language is simple that you use. Here's what you're going to say is most agents, and then you're going to describe what most agents do in that type of a situation. And then you're going to say, but not me. And then you're going to describe what you do differently. So you're going to specifically, in direct response to what they just told you mattered the most. So if their biggest concern was, let's say, communication, you're going to say most agents are going to list your home, they're going to put it on the market, and then you aren't going to hear from them unless there's a problem. That's just the reality of how most agents operate, but not me. Here's how exactly I stay in communication with you. Here's what it's going to look like every single week. And then you're going to go through and talk about how you're going to call them every week. Here's the information you're going to tell them is we're going to talk about the feedback we've had, the number of showings, the number of views online. We're going to talk about offers we've received or not received. See, if their biggest concern was them getting the right price, you're going to say most agents are going to tell you what you want to hear to get the listing. Or they're going to give you a number without really explaining how they got there, but not me. Here's how I approach pricing differently. And then I'm going to share with them that the market speaks in encrypted language and my job is to interpret that for them. See, that approach produces better results for a seller in your situation, is going through and talking about how you're going to approach the pricing of their property. See, if their biggest concern was something specific and unique to their house or their circumstances, Most agents would have either not asked or they would have just glossed over it, but not me. Here's what I'm going to do about that specifically. So hopefully you can see the difference. You're not presenting a generic marketing plan that you bring to every single appointment you go on. You're presenting a custom response to what this specific seller told you that they needed. That right there is what's going to make sellers choose you over agents with more experience or bigger marketing budgets than what you might have. Now, I want to be honest with you about something. There's a lot more to the execution of all three parts of this than what I've been able to walk you through right here. Like the specific language for the opening, the exact questions to ask and in what order, how to use the most agents do this, but not me. This is how I do it, that framework. Then so that it will feel natural and genuine rather than scripted and rehearsed. See, those details matter enormously. And getting them right is what turns this from a concept you understand into a skill you can repeat confidently on every single listing appointment that you ever go on. Now, I want to come back to what I said at the very beginning of this video. See, I said the third part only works if the first two are already in place. And I said that most agents skip right to the third part. Well, let me show you exactly what that means and why, and it explains every listing you've ever lost to someone who should have lost to you. See, most agents walk into that listing appointment and go directly into the presentation. They show their credentials, they flip through the marketing plan, they talk about what they're going to do to get the home sold. See, that's the third part, and they're leading with it before they've done the first two, and you will fail every time if you do that. See, the most agents do but not me framework, that third part, that only lands when the seller already trusts you and feels heard by you. And trust and connection don't come from a nice presentation. They don't come from impressive statistics or a beautiful binder. They come from asking questions, from then you listening and acknowledging what they told you and then responding to it specifically. See, without the first two parts in place, that third part's just another agent talking about themselves. The seller's already sat through 2 or 3 of those presentations and they all start to sound the same. But if you'll do this in the order that I showed you, with the first two parts, meaning the opening that creates some connection, and then the questions section that lets the seller feel genuinely heard and understood, then the third part becomes something completely different. It becomes proof. It becomes the agent actually listened to me, and now they're showing me specifically how they're going to address the thing that I said mattered most. See, that's completely different experience for the seller, and it explains why sellers choose agents who follow this sequence over agents who are objectively more qualified. Now, let me bring it back to the story that I started with. That brand new agent, the one on his first listing appointment ever, he didn't win because he was better than the other agent. He wasn't. He didn't have a track record. He had no production numbers to show. He had no awards on the wall to even show. I guess he could have said he passed the test the first time, but he won because he followed the sequence that I just outlined for you. He thanked them, acknowledged something specific, and then made a real promise. Then after that, he asked questions, including the most important one, and he actually listened to what their answers were, and then he addressed what they told him directly and specifically in a way that no other agent had ever even come close to doing. And the seller sat there at the end and said, "How long have you been doing this?" Not because they didn't like the presentation, but because it felt like a conversation, a real one, with someone who actually paid attention to what they said. And that feeling is what wins listings every single time, at every experience level, in any market. I don't care what is happening in the market. Now, if you're sitting there thinking, okay, I kind of understand the framework, I see why the sequence matters, but I want to make sure I'm executing all 3 parts of this correctly so that things actually change for you when you go on your next listing appointment. See, I've put together a video that walks through a program that I call 30 Deals in Your Phone. Now, You might be thinking, well, wait, I thought that was about referrals and building a sphere of influence system. And it is. But here's what I want you to understand about how these two things connect, how a good listing presentation and strong referrals, because the agent who builds a strong referral system gets called to the listing appointment by people who already know them and trust them. See, it makes it easier for you to show up and get the listing. And then when you show up to the appointment, those warm appointments with people who already have a degree of confidence in you because they either already know you or they've been referred to you by someone that they trust, that whole extra layer, this framework that I've given you on top of that trust, the close rate goes up dramatically. See, the referral system gets you in the door. The listing presentation framework that I just talked about wins the room. So click on the link in the video that will take you to a page where I will walk you through that 30 deals in your phone. And then after you've watched that, if you want to jump on a call with me, there'll be an option for you to click a link that gives you access to my calendar where you can book an appointment where you and I will sit down and talk about it. And I'm happy to talk more about the listing presentation if you want to, along with working your sphere of influence. But then that way you're going to get more listings. You're going to walk out with more agreements signed. See, that's how you do both. Now, go out and make somebody glad they met you today.